Hello, welcome to Behind the Showcase, your global fashion retail and supply chain podcast. Today, Thursday, April 30th. Adidas performs in the chaos. China rewrites the Africa trade map. H&M's sourcing playbook is a masterclass in risk management. Plus, retailers are leaking 5 cents on every dollar. And the denim cost curve just got steeper. I'm Sedat Sezer, breaking down the news and insights you need to start your day. Let's get started. Let's start with something that's been building across every earning calls, every freight reports, and every raw material index for the past 6 months. Today, it landed all in the same briefing, and the picture it paints is one of a global supply chain that it is simultaneously more expensive, more fragile, and more revealing about which brands have built real structural resilience and which ones are just riding favorable conditions. Let's open with Adidas. Because first quarter of 26 delivered a number that made a lot of people look twice. Revenue came in at 6.6 billion euro and up 14% on a currency neutral basis. Operating profit went up 16% to 705 million euros. And here's the part that doesn't usually show up in the headline. The Apparel division grew 31% on a currency neutral basis. Not footwear, apparel. That's the harder category to move in a discounting environment, and it moved hard. Now, what produced this? Two things are worth separating. First, Adidas has spent the last 18 months aggressively pivoting new product launches to its own direct-to-customer channels. Physical stores up to 19%, e-commerce up to 25%. Specifically to insulate itself from the wholesale discount spiral that's eating into everyone else's margins. CEO Bjørn Gulden made the logic explicit. When your competitor is running markdowns through the wholesale to clear inventory, you don't compete at that level. You protect the price point at your own door first. That's not just brand management, that's a margin architecture decision. Second, lifestyle is outperforming across the board. Samba, Taekwondo, Gulden himself said they're flying. And the read from management is that the male lifestyle segment hasn't been fully opened yet. That's a forward indicator, not a trailing one. What's the shadow on this picture? The Middle East conflict hasn't hit Adidas directly yet. Gulden confirmed that, but getting product into those markets is being operationally harder. And US tariffs are projected to add roughly 400 million euro in cost pressure across the full year. Gross margin is already running at 51%. Slightly compressed by the currency and the trade friction. If you ask me, Adidas is not a lucky story. It's a strategically well-positioned story. The DTC pivot that Gulden accelerated is now paying structural dividends. Exactly when the wholesale channel is the most dangerous place to be standing. This connects directly to a theme that runs through almost every other story today. The difference between brands management supply chain and the brands being managed by them. Let me move to H&M, because the data point that came out of their sourcing disclosure this week is one I want to spend some time on. H&M sources from roughly 800 apparel factories. Of those, 314 have been working with the group for over a decade. That's 40% of their supply base that has accumulated enough operating history with H&M to be considered genuinely strategic. Only 261 factories are in a relationship under 3 years old. Professor Shang Lu at the University of Delaware flagged what I think is the more important point here. Turkiye, Portugal, and Morocco all sit inside H&M top 10 sourcing countries. For a group of H&M scale, that's a deliberate nearshore architecture. These aren't tactical overflow destinations. They are embedded into supply structure. Here's what that matters right now. Every other story today involves freight disruption, war, air cargo contraction, or raw material inflation. The brands that enter 2026 with a balanced geographic sourcing map are in a fundamentally different position from those that concentrated into a long-haul Asia supply chains. H&M didn't build nearshore capacity because a consultant told them in 2024. They built it over a decade of relationship management. And that's the invisible moat that doesn't show up until something breaks. I've been watching this industry for over 25 years. The sourcing decisions that look obvious in a crisis were made quietly in stable years. This brings us to the freight and raw material environment, and the news here is genuinely consequential. The US-Iran war has now physically closed the Strait of Hormuz to normal traffic. The downstream effects are stacking up fast. Panama Canal reservation prices have nearly tripled. One company reportedly paid $4 million for a single passage booking. Global air cargo demand fell 4.8% in March year-on-year. Gulf carriers saw demand collapse 54% as airports closed and routes were suspended. This is a geographically specific shock that the data now confirms. And it's hitting manufacturer costs directly. India's denim fabric prices just moved up by 66 cents per meter. The mechanism is straightforward. Petrochemical-based dyes and agricultural chemicals are significant inputs into cotton denim production. When oil prices spike due to the conflict, that cost travels the value chain fast. And India is not a small player here. The mass market, youth-oriented segments that runs on a high-volume denim is now caught between a rising input cost and a price-sensitive consumer who won't absorb it. For export-oriented manufacturers negotiating customer contracts right now, the choice is painful. Absorb the margin hit or reopen the price conversation. Neither option is clean. And I'll be honest, I keep coming back to the same feeling when I watch this conflict. The conversation only gets loud when freight rates triple or a gross margin drops. Not before. Anyway, that's the world we operate in. Let me move to the story that I think is being vastly underestimated. China and Africa. Starting May 1st, tomorrow, China is extending zero-tariff access to all African nations with which it maintains diplomatic relations. This expands on the December 24 move to gave duty-free access to 33 least developed African countries. The policy runs for 2 years, through April 26, with a stated goal of formalizing a China-Africa joint development economic partnership by the end of that window. China's Ministry of Commerce described this as the first major economy to extend zero-tariff treatment to the entirety of Africa unilaterally. From where I sit, this is one of the most significant trade architecture moves of the past 12 months, and most people in the industry aren't watching it closely enough. China is under sustained US tariff pressures. Its answers to that pressure is not defensive, it's expansive. It's building the next decade's export markets, while the US is focused on taxing the last decade's supply chain. Africa's consumer base and its raw materials wealth and its emerging manufacturing capacity are all in play here. For the global textile and apparel industry, the signal for Western brand is clear. Africa is being positioned as a forward market, not a backup option. If you are not mapping Africa exposure now, you are mapping it in response mode later. This connects to the last story I want to cover today, and it's the one that will make every operation executive in the room slightly uncomfortable. A 2026 Retail Resilience and AI Adoption Survey found that retailers are losing approximately 5 cents on every dollar of revenue due to slow decision making. Not supply disruption, not raw material cost, slow decisions. The gap between detecting a problem and acting on it hasn't improved yet, despite heavy investments on analytics, visibility platforms, and generative AI tools. The number that lands hardest, leading retailers in North America and EMEA are running full-price sell-through rates of 71%, against an industry average of 57%. That's a 14-point gap. And the gap isn't explained by better products or favorable markets. It's explained entirely by decision velocity. The cost of delay in the survey is defined as a management operating model choice, not a market condition. The industry has the data, has the tools, has the platforms. What it doesn't have is the internal permission structure to act fast enough. AI has been adopted. The decision culture hasn't changed to match it. If you are running a sourcing function or a planning team, the honest read is this: you can have the best visibility infrastructure in the industry and still be operating on a decision cycle that's 2 weeks too slow. The main question I want to leave you with today is, in a market where freight costs are tripling, raw materials inputs are repricing in real time, and the brands that are winning are the ones that built their supply architecture quietly over the last decade. What decisions are you currently deferring that will look completely obvious in the hindsight? That's all for today's analysis. To make sure you never miss the insights behind the numbers, hit subscribe wherever you get your podcast. I'm Sedat Sezer. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week on Monday. Until then, stay ahead of the curve.